Hi, I'm Tessa, a veteran educator working in the field of special education.
And I'm Kim, mom of 2 autistic boys and a late diagnosed autistic person myself.
And welcome to Totally Over the Spectrum, where we dive into embracing autism through understanding and support. Welcome to episode 16, Executive Functioning. This is a hot topic. As I think a lot of times when you have poor executive functioning skills, it can get you into hot water very quickly. And whether that be with your parents, your family, the law, school, it is a difficult aspect to navigate. So I think we should take it off with, as always, the facts on what executive functioning disorder diagnosis is.
Okay, so I want to talk about what it is, how it works or it doesn't work, how it affects a person at home or at school or at work, because it affects every aspect of your life, and then what to do if you're having difficulties. So some strategies that we can talk about. All right, let's start with a definition.
As always.
Executive functioning refers to a set of 7 mental skills. The first one is adaptable or flexible thinking. So that's your ability to think about a subject in more than one way. The next one is attention. So the ability to focus and to respond. Organization. So arranging your thoughts or your environment. Planning. So it's setting a goal, thinking about the steps you need to do in order to achieve it, and prioritizing those steps. Self-control. The ability to manage your own emotions and your actions. Self-monitoring, to recognize and evaluate your own behavior, and working memory. So that's your ability to hold on to small amounts of information for a short period of time.
Okay.
It's a lot, but...
It is a lot, absolutely. I kind of broke it down into 4 categories, and for me, it was analyzing, organizing, decoding, and planning. So this is the most common aspects that I come across when I'm working in the education field. And also, on a personal field within families that I work with, I do see these as a consistent 4 that always come up.
I think if you go online and you start looking at executive functioning, you're going to find people break it down to 4 or 5 or 7 categories. So I liked more categories because I think each one of them is, like, I know where there's a little bit of overlap, but I think each one is really important to look at as its own thing, because when you're trying to work on a skill, the smaller components you can break that skill down into, the easier it is to work on it.
Yeah. So in essence, what you've done is just taken a task analysis and broken it down into its small, most teachable components. But what I really like is that you've brought the emotional piece. And I think a lot of times people miss that emotional piece, which I think is a huge factor in executive functioning.
Not every autistic person is going to struggle with executive functioning, but many do. And it's not specific to people with intellectual disabilities. It's really not specific to people who are autistic either.
No, it isn't. It's a broad... I find one of the areas that it affects people the most is with FAS, which is fetal alcohol syndrome. And I think that is a category in which executive functioning really does impact people, with that disorder. But regardless of what disorder you have, we're going to discuss skills and strategies that you can implement to help you overcome certain areas of weaknesses and play to your strengths.
Yeah, I'm going to focus mostly on how this impacts autistic people because that's my special interest and what I know about. But this is definitely, anybody who has executive functioning difficulties can learn something from what we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about strategies that could apply to anybody.
Okay, let's do this.
All right. I want to also say that it has nothing to do with how smart you are. I know that a lot of this makes people feel like, well, if I can't do this, it means I'm stupid. And that's not the case. So for autistic people, it has to do with how the autistic brain is wired. And I'm not going to get into the details of the neurobiology of all of that, but just to say in its simplest terms that autistic brains have a lot of short connections, but not a lot of long connections. So transferring information, like that connectivity between the different regions of the brain, can affect your executive functioning and cause executive functioning challenges.
Yes, it does. And I think also the emotional part to this is when people seem to think that, you know, I'm not smart enough to do that, and it really affects their self-esteem. So we're going to talk a little bit on that and how this is going to help with the self-esteem aspect of it.
So let's start with adaptable, or sometimes called flexible thinking. So that's the ability to think about a subject in more than one way. And it also means the ability to shift your thinking or your actions in response to situational changes.
Okay.
So let's talk about first, why is that important? Why is this an important thing? And I think it's important because of perspective. Like, changing your perspective can change your life.
It most definitely can. You're changing your perspective gives you far more options and avenues in which you can navigate out of a situation. And it takes you away from an analysis paralysis, right? So if you can adapt to having a mindset that can pivot, it's going to allow you to implement, strategies and navigate through a situation a lot more effectively.
Yeah, and like you were talking about that emotional component, I have a story for this one. I was at the grocery store, and I always park away from the grocery store. I get too nervous parking next to the grocery store because it's too busy. So I park as far away as I possibly can and walk. And as I was walking, I could see this elderly woman trying to put her grocery cart away, and she was having a really difficult time. So I sped up a little bit, but I didn't get there in time to help her with it. And as she was walking towards me, she was slumped over and she was, struggling walking along. And as I approached her, she said, getting old is a terrible thing. And I looked at her and I said, we're extremely fortunate. Not everybody makes it. And that's just me thinking logically in the moment and not taking her emotions into consideration. That's sort of, oops. But she stopped dead in her tracks and she blinked and she looked at me and she goes, you're absolutely right. And she stood up straighter and she walked to her car straighter. Like she just, and nothing changed really. Like it's still going to be that difficult for her to put her cart away next time. But her perspective on that situation 180'd for her. And how powerful is that?
Yeah, absolutely. It is life altering. When you change that perspective to my glass is half full. Where is the silver lining in the situation? It becomes less daunting. So, way to go, Kimberly.
Wow, mouth in gear, brain not working. Yeah. Right? Like that was just oops. I was just stating a fact.
Yep.
And that can backfire a lot. I think you could also apply that to how neurotypical people think about autistic people, right? Like if a neurotypical person treats autism like it's a disease or a disorder or a terrible misfortune, it isn't. I'm not saying there aren't challenges, but just because something isn't easy doesn't mean that it's bad.
I think when things are not easy, people who have to work that extra bit in order to meet the same plateau as neurotypical people have a greater sense of resilience. They build so much more resilience than neurotypical people. So there is the silver lining in, neurodivergent people. So I think they have a greater sense of resilience.
If it doesn't break us, yep.
Nope.
So adaptive thinking or flexible thinking, how is that important specifically for autistic individuals? I think it allows you to let go of methods that don't work and move on to new possibilities. If you are stuck in a mindset that this is the way it's always been done and you're not open to new and possibly better ways of doing things, like autistic people awfully have that need for sameness, rigidity, right? And that can be debilitating. Like if you always go to school or to work on the same route every time, and then there's construction, that can throw you off completely, right? Because you haven't found an alternative route to go just in case. So you're in that sameness mindset. So So what happens if you build in that ability to have flexible and adaptable thinking, you will be able to put in coping strategies, right? So I'm terribly bad with change, and I understand that change is an inevitable part of life. But if it's a big change or a lot of little changes all at once, it's a physiological response that I cannot control. So I have to develop coping strategies in order to offset that. So if I'm on a route and it's clogged up, right? You can't get through, there's an accident or something, you have to go on a detour. I need to pull the car over, take out my Google Maps, find an alternative route, take some deep breaths, tell myself everything's fine, everything's fine. If I'm really going to be late, I can contact the person I'm going to go see, tell them there's an accident, tell them I'm going to be late. Everything is going to be fine. The world is not going to be on fire just because this happened. And I need to talk myself down, set a new route, and then proceed to drive when I am feeling like I can be okay to drive again, when it is safe to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. That is an excellent strategy. And I think adaptable thinking really also builds the emotional intelligence part in you. And it forces you to now pivot and be in a state of mindfulness, which when you practice that on a daily basis, it really opens the door to building skills in other areas.
Yeah. Let's talk about some strategies. So strategies for this, knowing changes ahead of time, if possible. I think that is a really, really good strategy. So if you have trouble with change or change of schedule or that sort of thing, finding out ahead of time, letting the autistic person know ahead of time, hey, in 5 minutes or an hour or tomorrow, we're going to be doing this other thing, whatever that person needs, because it is different for every single person. Letting them know ahead of time so that they can wrap their head around it and get themselves ready for that change. Mm-hmm. I also, repeat to myself a lot, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Like just that if you say something to yourself enough times, you will calm yourself down. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes you need to say that out loud. Sometimes you do that in your head. I think, like you said, stretching ourselves to experience things outside of our comfort zone is crucial.
Yes. And as an educator or even as a parent, I intentionally will do that. Like I will intentionally stretch those boundaries, because when I do stretch those boundaries, that's when I see the biggest amount of growth. And I scaffold that learning where the success of one is going to be the platform for the other. So, let's take for an example of going from point A to point B. And, my student is like, nope, we have to take this thing. I'm going to go, intentionally, I'm going to go, hey, I have to drop this off at the office. So can we please drop this off at the office and then do our loop? But we're going to do it in reverse. And, can you please take responsibility and, carry this item? It's not required at the office. And it's usually I put in a heavier piece of items, so they have to focus on holding the object in which I have given them, because it's a little bit awkward. And their focus now has been transferred from taking a different route to this object that they have to hold, which is awkward, but needs to be delivered to the office because it is important for it to be there. And once they get there, I go, wow, that you were so helpful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This really helped me out. I really, really appreciate that. That you worked so hard in order to help get this over here. And then we continue on our way, and then there's a sense of an accomplishment, right? Oh my gosh, I've helped my teacher, do something that was really important to them, and they've forgotten about taking an alternative route. And I've paired off in a sense of accomplishment with taking an alternative route, and then they didn't even realize they've done something that is out of the norm.
Right. And I think it's important. Like I think of myself in that situation. I think for children, sometimes your strategies are different than when you're adults.
Yes.
Because I would now be trying to go, okay, wait, now I have to hold this thing and I have to plan a new route. But I'm guessing like you're sort of leading that route. You're not asking that child to take the new route. You're leading them through it. So they're doing it, but they're just following you. They're not having to think about where they're going.
Yeah, because now I'm introducing an idea that we have to do something that is different. So that is so daunting, right? It's like, oh my gosh, like we have to go a different route. And I don't want them to obsess on that thought. I want them to just be in the moment. So when I take away from going an alternative route by placing something that is in their hand, and depending upon the student, I use different strategies. I always use humor because I think it really connects with kids regardless of their level. And I usually chat a lot, right? I'd be like, oh, like look at this, and oh my God, look at that painting, and kind of keep the distraction level at a high because I've got their focus everywhere else except on what it is that I was accomplishing in the first place.
Right. I think scripting, like having prepared scripts, can help with flexible thinking in social situations, because that's a hard thing for autistic people. And I know that if I'm in a social situation and I don't have a script, like I can follow a script along, got some experience doing that, and then someone will say something to me, or there will be a situation that happens I'm not prepared for, and I am done. I don't know what to say. I mean, this happened recently that there was an exchange of gifts and I wasn't expecting it. And I feel like my face did not match what it was supposed to match in that moment because I received something that I wasn't expecting.
And it's okay to be quiet. And that's another, strategy I'd be saying. It's okay to just be in the moment, to absorb the moment and just say, thank you. You don't have to say anything more than that. Or, if you're a teenager and you're in a situation where you're not quite sure how to navigate it, just say, I'm just observing. I'm just checking things out. And to me, this is great. I don't need to be involved in it. I like to be on the sidelines looking at it. And that's okay. You've got to give yourself permission to say, that's okay.
It's really hard to do in the moment. And once it's happened, I will go and I will think about it and I'll think, okay, if this sort of thing happens again, then I will have a script ready of what to say, even if it's, I wasn't expecting this. Because that is a socially acceptable thing to do. And it lets the other person know, it's not that they didn't like what they received. It's just taken them off guard. But in the moment, I didn't know what to do. So the strategy would be, once something happens and you don't know what to do, you're allowed to go away and think about it and plan for the next time.
So circling back to, adaptability, there's no amount of time and situation, like you cannot plan a script for every possible scenario and situation. The only thing that is really going to help build those skills is experience, is putting yourself into those situations in order to learn from them and just take away. And, and it's okay to make mistakes because, in making those mistakes, we learn how not to do something. So if anything I'd like to say about that is put yourself out there. Go ahead and do it.
Easier said than done. All right, let's move on to attention. So that's the ability to focus and to respond. And this also involves having self-awareness about your attention level and being able to filter out and ignore distractions, and also being able to direct or to redirect your focus based on prioritizing and reevaluating a situation or task. Now, it sounds like a mouthful of words, but it becomes very apparent with examples. So this is important because I think it helps, it makes you able to learn.
It does. And I think a lot of times neurotypical people, look for that eye contact in order to make sure that the person that they're communicating with is providing them the attention that they they believe is necessary in order to move forward on a task. Now, attention to something doesn't mean I have to stay looking and focused at you in order to hear what you're saying, in order to understand what you're saying, right? So people have got to just take a step back and go, which part of attention, how does this person, what does this person need in order to maximize their attention skills, right? Whether it's less visual distraction, and in most cases it is. The more visually distracting an environment is, the harder it is to focus, right? Is there too much, background noise going on in order for a person to, focus on orderly, right? And is there, are they coming in from an event that has had their emotions on a really high or a really low in order for them to be able to have the emotional, resilience in order to focus on that task? So there are so many different areas when it comes to attention that, in honesty, it can have its own podcast in order to deal with strategies, to help people in different areas.
Yeah, it could. It really does affect everyone differently. And you're right, making eye contact isn't necessary. And sometimes it's so much harder to focus if someone wants me to look directly at them, especially if it's an emotionally charged conversation. I can't do it. I can't do both things. I'm never going to be able to do both things. So pick. Like, I can't be there for you emotionally and look you dead in the eye. That's not going to happen.
So for me, it would be saying, as a parent or an educator or, a coworker, it's just saying, understand how this person works is going to be your best strategy in allowing them to listen and obtain the information that they need in order to perform the task that you're asking them to do.
Another thing is fidgeting. Some people think and focus better when they have a fidget toy, when they have something to fidget with. Sometimes they'll play with their hair or, play with their fingers. And stimming is also another one, and it's sort of along the same lines as fidgeting, but it helps with self-regulation, right? So if you are regulated, you are better able to pay attention. If you are not regulated, you cannot pay attention.
Yeah.
So if someone's flicking their pen or something while they're thinking or while they're listening, that's not always a sign that it's not personal, right? I think a lot of people take these things personally. Well, you're not giving me your undivided attention, therefore I am not important to you.
So we've got to check the ego into place and go, look, we're here to collaborate and find what is the best strategy in order to achieve the outcome that we're seeking. So, this is going to take a lot of, getting to know the person that you're working with or you're with in order to fine tune what is going to obtain the best focus skills for them.
Yeah, judging autistic people based on neurotypical norms is unfair and it is completely unhelpful. I think another reason why this is important is safety. And if you are hyper-focused on something, you might not be aware of your surroundings, right? And also self-care. If you are hyper-focused, you will be so involved, you might forget to eat, forget to sleep, forget to go to the washroom. I mean like 8 hours of doing something where you have ignored all of your bodily needs.
Yes. Yeah. So this is, I think, one of the hardest areas in order to implement strategies. And the best strategy for that is really is going to take somebody, an external person, in order to come and break that cycle first. That is, and then slowly implement, you're going to have to create a muscle memory, right? When it comes to hyperfocusing, you're going to have to break that by getting somebody to come in and physically, break that cycle for you. And I'm not saying physically, like coming and grabbing you and, manipulating you, but being a physical intervention, being there present and saying, hey, it's time to stop, right? If, like, for example, you're hyper focused on a task on the computer, it's just going to say, come and tap you on the shoulder and say, you need a break. and just close the computer down. Simple, right? Let's get up and move. Like, shadow me, right? Whether it's getting up and movement, going into the kitchen, pouring myself a drink, just pouring them a drink and just sliding it over, engage in conversation, and just say, do what I do, and, take a drink, grab a bite to eat, and then just break that cycle. And you're going to do that on a regular basis when this person is in a hyper focused situation, till their body starts to now realize and goes, okay, after this amount of time, I'm used to this break. And it does take a long period of time, but the body will slowly start to build in that muscle memory and start to break that cycle by itself.
And just so people are aware, breaking a hyperfocus can be physically painful.
It can
like
be.
really, really physically painful. And you can have a meltdown, you can have a shutdown. If you don't have that resilience that you're talking about built in, it's going to be extremely difficult. Or there are going to be days where even if you have built up some resilience, some days are harder than others. It's not the same all the time.
No, it isn't. But you have to look at what is the larger safety aspect. The safety and well-being of this person, it has to be, in order to break the cycle, and the outcome of breaking the cycle and causing that short-term discomfort in order for that long-term, health and importance is where you have to weigh and balance it out.
So just to go over some of the strategies we talked about, I think clear, concise instructions are really helpful for people. Taking body breaks, that movement. You might not have someone who can interrupt your hyperfocus. Maybe you can set a timer to break your hyperfocus. Like you can get your computer to shut itself down, right? Or to give you a countdown, right? There are apps that can help with these things, fidget toys, visual supports, right? Like organizers, charts, lists, and teaching that person to self-reflect, right? Set a timer and go, your timer could say, have you eaten today? Oh, wait, no, I don't think I have.
So a lot of these strategies first have to be implemented when you're not in a hyperfocus state, because when you are in a hyperfocus state, it really, it takes a lot of mindfulness in order to break that hyperfocus. So practice these strategies when you are not in a hyperfocus state in order for you to be able to access them. So what I do like is something that is visual and audio, because then it's kind of sending keys to both, the audio aspect of your, yourself, and the visual aspect. So, and it's coming at you a dual areas, and therefore is more able to break and make an impact on breaking that hyperfocus.
I did see a funny video that said, hey, if you want to do the same thing at the same time every day, get a cat, feed them at that time every day, and they will let you know, and they will not stop. Yep. So I'm not suggesting everybody gets a cat. I just think it's funny because it's true.
Don't I know it?
Yeah. So our next one is organization, which is arranging your thoughts or your environment.
This is a key one. I think this is something that in order to have good focus skills, if you have good organizational skills, it's going to help you build on your focus skills. So organization skills is key to people who are in employment, right? Because you have to organize your day from, to get up, to get ready, to get to work on time, right? And there are times where people go, well, I start my job at 9:00. So they forget that it takes time to get ready, to get onto a public system or to drive, or, in order to get to their job. So this is the part of executive functioning that, is a real battle for a lot of people, these organizational skills, because when you don't have good organizational skills, you get a lot of visual clutter, you get a lot of physical clutter, you get a lot of audio clutter, right? So organizational skills are key. And there is a ton of, strategies and technology and, just even, a calendar, that there's a lot that you can use in order to help, really maintain organizational skills and build on them.
Yeah, I agree. I think having the tools you need to perform a task, really, that's one of the important aspects of this. And like you said, being prepared, people underestimate the impact of an untidy environment on your mental health.
Yes, they really do. It's like, oh, I have piles of things and I know where they are, but all of those they fail to recognize that this clutter is taking up a lot of cognitive space because your mind is having to sift through all of these different areas of clutter in order to achieve, to remember where that task, to initiate completing that a task is. So yeah, becoming visually more organized is really going to help you.
I think it's also important. So, not having things in place can also lead to issues like anxiety and stress. And just having a sense of control and predictability can be really important for people. And then also, if you're organized, it gives you more time for enjoyable things and for self care.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is crucial, right? In order to, it becomes a cycle, right? So you have to create a positive cycle in order to maintain a positive cycle.
So, you're right, there are a lot of strategies, like a lot of strategies, but we'll just highlight some of these briefly. Visual supports, like you said, lists, check things off your list. Like, I find that extremely satisfying. I like to make lists. Okay, I don't have executive functioning issues, but I like to be organized. Like, that is fun for me. And being able to make a list is enjoyable, especially if I get to color code the list. I'm happy. Also, stationery, right? Like the different colored pens and markers and whiteboards and all of those things bring me joy. So I have a calendar. I have to color code. I color code my kids in my calendar, right? Alex is red in my calendar. Peter's purple. Also alliteration makes me happy. So it's like my calendar has a lot of colors and is sort of visually maybe overwhelming for some people, but I can look at it really quickly and go, what does Peter need to be doing? Oh yeah, he's purple. So I can just look at the purple stuff and know what he needs to be doing that week, right? So I find that really helpful.
I'm just going to jump in here quickly. Now, when you create a list, keep it real, keep it realistic in order for you to achieve those, those goals. Because if you set yourself a list of tasks to be done that are unrealistic, it's going to do the opposite. It is going to set you up for failure rather than success. So managing those lists and setting expectations, real achievable expectations, is very important.
Yeah, that is the difference between having a to-do list and getting overwhelmed by the amount that is on your to-do list. So that goes back to prioritizing.
Yes.
Right. And executive functioning skills are not happening independently in a vacuum. Like, these all overlap each other.
Do.
So that is why, another reason why prioritizing is an essential skill,
Yeah.
because you could have your to-do list and then not know what to do on it first.
Yes.
So we talked about prompting and prompt fading, timers, time limits, systems to keep things simple, right? Not having those piles of things. I also have a table near the front door that holds all the things that you need on it for when you are going out, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you need your keys, you need your sunglasses, whatever that might be, all at the table. So you can stop there. You have a one stop where you can go, oh yes, I need all of these things to sort of gear up before you go out into the world. This isn't going to happen overnight.
No, it is not. It's going to take time, it's going to take effort, and it's going to take persistence.
And not all of these are going to work for you. You have to trial and error this to see what works and what doesn't, and not give up on it.
Okay. And for those of us who are listening right now, you might be wondering what that noise is. It's the dogs snoring in the living room.
I wish I could move the camera for them, but I'll never get it back in the same position. That causes me anxiety. It's very cute. The next one on our list is planning. And planning is setting a goal, thinking about the steps to achieve it, and prioritizing those steps. So that sort of builds on what we're talking about with organization. You are more likely to achieve your desired outcome if you are able to make a plan and then execute that plan.
Yes. And I think a lot of people, I'm going to give you an example for I think a lot of parents will relate to this. Your teenage kid is hungry, so you tell them, well, go get yourself something to eat. So they enter into the kitchen. Their task is to get themselves something to eat, right? So they go into the kitchen, they create a, beautiful, grilled cheese sandwich and, whatever beverage it is. And to them, in their executive functioning mind, they have accomplished the task of getting something to eat. But as a parent, you go, the task is not complete until the kitchen has been restored to the manner in which you entered it in. So when you're creating that plan, it should be a plan that executes from A to Z in its entirety, but not from A to T, where T is means I've achieved my goal of wanting to eat something, so now I'm over and done with.
I literally have make a sandwich down as my example for this, because your daughter has executive functioning challenges and my oldest son Alex has executive functioning challenges. So we have talked about these things a lot. And although Alex has a level 1 diagnosis, so he has lower support needs, and your daughter does not. Think your daughter might have ADHD, but she's not diagnosed. Yeah, we have talked about this. They go in the, well, Alex would need me to prompt him to go make the sandwich. Otherwise he would starve to death, because he doesn't have that skill yet in order to stop what he's doing and go make something. But he's getting better, right? There are days where he does do it and there are days where he doesn't do it, which is a win. That is a win. Take those small wins when you have them.
Absolutely.
They make the sandwich, but then leave the knife, leave the crumbs all over the counter, maybe leave things. Alex isn't so bad at this, at leaving things on the counter that he's already used. He does put those away. But I know your daughter sometimes might just have a disaster. Like, it's just a disaster.
Oh, the cooking creation is amazing.
Oh,
like,
yes.
She's created herself an outstanding meal. And I walk into the kitchen and I go, I have to leave. Okay, I have to leave. And I go, you need to put the kitchen back the way it was when you entered it, and leave. So, and then she's like, but I just ate. And I'm like, yeah, your task of eating is done. Now the task of cleaning and restoring, the kitchen back to its original form must occur.
Yeah. And sometimes she doesn't see the mess.
No, she doesn't. Yeah, she legitimately will say, Mom, I don't see it. Like, I don't see what the mess is all about. I know where everything is, right? And to me, when everything is in a clutter, like, that is so overwhelming. The visual clutter to me is so overwhelming. It's just like, oh, okay, it's taking my breath away. I have to step aside and then return when I'm in a more calm state.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are a lot of parents out there who can relate. Being able to plan also reduces that person's anxiety. So planning ahead, being able to think about outcomes and the steps that you might need to take.
Yeah.
And then scheduling. You can't physically be in two places at the same time. So being able to plan and prioritize allows you to decide which one you're supposed to be doing at that time.
Yeah. And which one is a priority, right? So they've got to stop and think of the big picture, which sometimes is very difficult.
Yeah, there are a lot of components to this. It's not
Yes,
just simple. So some strategies, visual supports, again, lists. There are plenty of apps out there. I won't go over them all. There's lots of videos out there on apps. iPhone notes, Evernote, all those things. Organizers, calendars, mind maps are often really helpful for some people. Also modeling, someone modeling for you how to plan, right? Because maybe you can't prioritize. You have no idea what
this task looks like. Absolutely. Yeah. It is one of my go-to strategies, regardless of your level 1 or level 3. Modeling is really important because it shows you it gives you the visual, it involves all aspect of it, right? So it involves the kinesthetic approach, right? So it's hands-on, it's, mental, it's physical, it's emotional, all of that put in together, I think it really impacts the learning of a person.
Right. So if we continue with our sandwich analogy, you might make the sandwich together, eat together, and clean up together.
Yes. And then the next time I would start it and have them do the middle and then finish it. So I would fade the learning, right? And then whether I forward, chain the learning or reverse chain the learning, either way, the learning is being accomplished.
And sometimes it can be so overwhelming to think about all the steps necessary to complete a task that you don't even bother getting started.
Yes, and that what I usually call is an analysis paralysis, because they just go, "Oh my God, I have to do this, 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 and this." Like, no, just focus on step one. That's all you need to do. Just step one. And then if you can just do step one on one day, call it a day. And then the next day you do step 1 and 2. Call it a day. Next, and then you just slowly build on that and build the resilience and the skills to do it.
Yeah. There's also a thing called autistic inertia, which is sometimes you have difficulty getting started on a task or difficulty stopping a task. And I definitely have that. Like, even if it's the preferred task, the amount of energy I need to build up in order to get something started, even though I know I'm going to enjoy it. And I might even hyper focus on it once I've started it, but getting started can feel so monumentous. It's just so much in order to just that first step. So for example, if I need to clean, and I like to clean everything in one day and then everything is just done, and then I, do it again the next week. So it's like, I'll just clean the bathroom. That's just in my brain. I'll say, okay, I'm not doing everything. I'm just starting there. And then once I get started, then I will just go through all the steps and all the processes and do the whole thing.
Yeah. It's just getting that starting.
Yeah. The next point is self-control. So that's the ability to manage your own emotions and your actions. And it's sometimes called impulse control or inhibition.
That is huge, because when you don't know where to start, you don't know what to do next, you can feel your anxiety increasing. You start to feel anxious, you feel nervous, you have all of this energy starting to build and you don't know what to do with it. And one of two things happens. One, either you explode or you implode, right? So the only way that you're going to be able to master this is allowing yourself to be put into a situation for small increments of time and then build the resiliency. So you have to build emotional intelligence by exposing yourself to situations and allowing yourself to be in that situation, even for just as minimal amount of time as you possibly can. And then the next time, just stretch that boundary just that little bit more in order to build those resiliency skills.
So this doesn't have to be a big thing. Like, an example could be, just taking turns in conversations, right? That can be really hard. Especially if it's a topic that's really interesting for an autistic person, they might want to info dump it and just keep going and going and going and saying all the things because they're so excited to talk about this particular topic. But being able to stop, being able to let that other person say something is a necessary communication in life.
It is necessary, and it goes back to our very first point that we discussed, the ability to pivot, right? So everything that we're discussing right now, they build onto each other and they're interlocked with each other.
Yeah. So this is important because it allows a person the ability to prioritize their wants and their needs in a meaningful way, avoid dangerous or potentially dangerous behavior to themselves or others, and also to learn to refrain from making unnecessarily hurtful comments. It might be a true statement, but it might not be a necessary statement or a kind statement.
Yeah. And the only way you're going to learn that is by practicing it.
Yeah. Another example of this would be the ability to set healthy boundaries and to avoid excess and extremes, and that could be like food, spending, screen time. And another example is the ability to do non-preferred tasks.
Yep. And it also helps reduce that hyperfocus state as well.
And that's not to say that you can never hyperfocus, because there is so much joy in a hyperfocus.
But as long as it's not detrimental to your well-being.
No, I'm sure you could do 4 hours easy without,
That is
harming
absolutely.
yourself. It's going to be different for everybody.
Yes, it is. Everybody's tolerance levels are going to be different, but, as long as it's not detrimental to your well-being. Strategies.
So we talked about some of these: modeling appropriate behavior, practicing sharing a preferred item. I know anytime Peter is level 3, non-speaking, so he has high support needs. And anytime I've had to take him to like a doctor appointment or something like that, we bring his iPad with him, because that is his preferred item, and that can help him regulate himself, and it's happy. So I don't see a problem. Anyway, so whenever I have had to take that iPad away from him so that the doctor can perform an exam or whatever, I notice that a lot of professionals are really surprised when I can just say, "Oh, can I have your iPad, please?" And he just hands it to me.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have any sort of reaction to it. He's just like, "Okay, here you go."
Because that was implemented at a very early stage. And for your level 3, or level 2s and 3s, that skill needs to be practiced as the earliest opportunity that you can, because that is a crucial skill in order to build on the emotional regulation piece. I cannot stipulate how important that is, right? Because as they mature, as they grow, you're going to be able to expand that into so many different areas of learning. And it is going to be the foundation in building a lot of success.
You're right. I forget about, he's 17 now, so I forget about some of these things. But now that you're saying that, I did do that. He would have his iPad, and I would say to him, "Can I have your iPad?" And I would just take it for like a second and hand it right back to him. Like, just take it, hand it back. Thank you. Off you go. Forget about it. There's no praise. because he doesn't work well on big emotions. So there's not usually praise for him or any kind of censure or anything like that. It's just, okay, that's a thing that happened, and we move on. So yeah, and then you could take it for longer periods of time, so that I could take it whenever I needed to, and he knows it's coming back.
Yep. And it's also that state of, that you provided him. It's like that neutral emotion, and that's what you want to, mirror that emotion to them. It's like, it's not a big deal, right? So you're actually, in essence, subconsciously showing them that doing this activity, this transition, should not be such a massive emotion. It's just, here we go.
And that's for neurotypical kids too. If a child falls in the playground, and you must see this like all the time, child falls, and if people go, "Oh my goodness, are you okay?" They're like, "Wait a minute, am I okay? I don't think I'm okay," and they'll start to cry.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. But if you go over and you go, "Oh no, you're okay. Come on, let's see what's happened, and let's get you cleaned up," they're like, "Oh, I'm okay."
Yeah, it's not a big deal, right? Yeah, absolutely, it's not a big deal. Carry on.
Another strategy would be to teach problem solving and talk about things like dangerous behavior and why it's dangerous, because what you see as a parent might be a dangerous behavior kids don't always see, and sometimes adults don't always see.
And there's a fine line between, it's not a fine line, but, there is a line in which you have to allow a child to experience certain boundaries so that they learn on their own what is safe and what is not, right? And it's those unspoken, areas, those gray areas in which explicit teaching is necessary. But there are areas in which, like, oh, let me climb the fence. To a certain extent, you should allow them to experience those boundaries in order to know, to what extent is safe and what is not. When, the impact of their decisions is not going to endanger their life or their well-being. But understanding that, those boundaries really does help.
It does. When Alex was really little, and Alex is level 1, low support needs, I think he was maybe 2 or 3. So he knew what was going on when I asked him not to do something. So we were in an apartment and it was like a concrete floor with like parquet floor over top. So if you hit that floor, it's going to hurt. And he was rolling around on the couch. And I said to him, "You're going to fall. You're going to fall. You're going to hit the floor. It's going to hurt." And he didn't really want to listen. And I thought, okay, I'm only going to tell you so many times and then my patience is out. So I took some pillows and I put them on the floor next to, like, big pillows, and on the floor next to the couch, and I walked away. And the next thing, he's lying on his back on the pillow, staring up at the ceiling, and he's like, like this panic look. And I looked at him, I said, "Well, I told you you're going to fall." He didn't hurt himself, but it was a high enough fall for him that the shock of it was scary for him. But he wasn't hurt, right? He didn't hit the floor. He hit the pillows. So he had a soft landing. Did he ever do it again? No. And then did he learn when I said, "Hey, that's not safe. This is why." Oh, maybe I should listen to that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, sometimes you just have to let them fall.
Experience, yeah. Experience. And it's a greater teacher than what, we could possibly say and do for them.
Also teaching self-regulation techniques like deep breathing.
Yeah, I think that is a very underestimated strategy, right? And this is just across the board. Just to slow the mind down, if you stop and focus on deep breathing and taking that deep breath in where you can feel it in your stomach, that it actually allows, when you focus on that, it just helps everything slow down and allows your mind to just regulate itself in order to make better decisions.
Social stories can also be another strategy that's really helpful depending on the person's age and their ability.
It is. And, and with Alex being your level 1, just having a discussion with them, right? It really does help. So depending upon the situation, their age, their level, you have to apply different strategies for it.
I mean, when teenagers don't understand the dangers of social situations, those are conversations you need to have before they find themselves being taken advantage of in some way.
Yeah, they're far more vulnerable than your neurotypical kids.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one to talk about is self-monitoring. So that's being able to recognize and evaluate your own behavior.
Yeah, and that is, you can do that, kind of tags on to your self-regulation, right? In order to, once you start to have better regulation skills, you're able to then move on to this. And one of the best strategies to that is journaling, I think, right? Is just taking some time out to be able to write down, your thoughts, your feelings, and then reflect on it, right? It does really, I find it does help.
So this is about increasing the person's ability to stay on task, increasing positive social behavior, initiation, cooperation, and decrease disruptive and destructive behaviors. So you're right. Choosing a single, easier behavior to address first is going to set you up for success. So something as easy as making your bed every day.
It does.
And instead of doing something like decreasing your screen time, which might be a lot harder.
Yeah. So a lot of people have asked me, why is it important to make your bed first thing in the morning? I said, because it sets your mind up for task completion, right? It's a simple skill, right? Pulling up the sheet, pulling up the comforter, putting the pillows on top. It's a very easily obtained, low cognitive ability skill. But it is a skill that you're able to complete, and it sets your mind in a momentum of task completion, right? It's setting that muscle memory for you to complete tasks, and therefore setting you up for a day where you're able to complete tasks successfully. The other aspect, since I'm jumping in here, journaling, when you actually sit down and write your thoughts and feelings in the moment and you go back and you reflect, it gives you the opportunity to change the narrative of the words that you use and how you feel about yourself. It's going to help you recognize the negativities that you think and feel about yourself and put some momentum into changing that narrative.
It's also really helpful to get an idea of how often the behavior is occurring.
Yeah.
So
it
keeping
builds.
track of it can be really helpful before you get started. And you could use journaling, you could use chart. Again, there's apps out there for all of those things. And talking about it so that you can see where you've started and you can see progress.
Yeah. And, having to and discussing and with somebody that you feel safe and is going to be key as well.
And I mean, ideally, we want to see a person monitoring themselves, but that takes time.
It does.
And keeping the person engaged in the process and slowly fading your prompting and your monitoring is it's going to be very specific to them and what they need and how long they need it for.
And specific to the task that they're involved in too.
And you might want to set some milestones so that you feel like you're making progress. I know some apps, give you little badges and awards, like I made my bed every day this week, and you get, like a woohoo that you did that. And I'm making fun of it a little bit, but I'm not minimizing the fact that that sense of accomplishment can be very powerful.
Yeah, it is. It can be very powerful, and it sets you up for success.
So definitely, like maybe you didn't make your bed every day this week, but you made it 2 times instead of just once. Mm-hmm. That's success.
That's progress.
The last one is working memory, which is holding on to small amounts of information for a short period of time.
This is such a huge impact on people's, executive functioning, right? That working memory it's such a crucial part that it can either set you up for a lot of success once you kind of master that and put in strategies to help you with that, or it can send you down a rabbit hole very quickly. I think that this is a topic that can warrant its own conversation, the working memory. There are a lot of strategies out there, but I think the most effective one is implementing, taking time out to work specifically on building that skill every day, is going to be the best way to, to build the resiliency in this area.
Yeah. Working memory is important because we're constantly using it throughout the day, every day. Being able to follow multi-step instructions, remembering directions, completing simple tasks, gathering information from one source and applying it to a different setting, and keeping track of your personal belongings like your pen, your car keys, your wallet, whatever. So working memory is significant.
It is very significant. And I'm just trying, it is also person specific. It is also task specific. It is also situational specific, that it is difficult to give you, strategies that can be implemented right across the board, right? We have to talk about it, on a one-to-one basis in order to provide you that strategy that's going to work best for the type of personality you are, the level at which you function at, the situation that you're presenting. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to provide strategies that are, broad, but we're going to do our best.
All right. I found, well, first of all, it can be expanded with practice. It can be.
Yeah,
so none of these are completely like, I can't do anything about it. It's hard work. It is hard work. And it's going to be a lot of trial and error. All right. Strategies, lists. Lists can help with your working memory. Waitress, sometimes they have to write down the orders, right? Because they're not going to remember the order for 6 people from the table to the kitchen, right? So sometimes you get a waiter who can, right? Who's just like, yep, I got it. And other people are like, there's no way I'm going to remember. So does some of that improve with practice? Yes. But if you can make a list and you don't have to memorize it, you can make life easier for yourself. You don't have to push yourself to that level. Using acronyms, like how to remember the colors of the rainbow, Roy G. Biv, right? Yep. You don't need to memorize that and have that, like, I have to know that red comes first. No, you can remember, you can have little tools to help you with that, right? In school, I remembered that we're in Southern Ontario. I remember the Great Lakes are spell homes, right? Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior spells homes. So
So those are strategies for more high functioning, level one, possibly level two, right? But you go into your late, higher level two to level threes, those acronyms are not really going to work, right? So it's just specifics, right? But these are generalized strategies that we're addressing are more for your level one.
okay, but the next one could be games and puzzles.
I was going to suggest that memory games, absolutely, they are,
And that could
it's-
be level 2, level 3.
Yes, it can. It could be, kind of, simplified in order to, to meet the needs of level three learners. Yeah.
Right? Making up a song to help you remember to do something. Right? I used to have songs for everything, mostly because I would be crazy trying to tell the kids to keep doing things over and over again. If I made a song, it made it easier on me. But you'd have a wash your hands song, you'd have a get your shoes on song. I remember that repetition when Alex was really little. He would always put his mittens on and then try to do up his zipper. And I'm like, what are we doing? Why are we doing that? And you're making me crazy. And then I would end up saying the same thing to him every single time. I'd say, Alex, what goes on last? And then he'd go, mittens. And I say, how did I say it now? What goes on last? Mittens. Oh, I can't even remember now. It was so long ago, right? But then, and it would end with, because mittens go on last, right? Like it was just like this sort of back and forth repetition. I'll have to write it in the comments if I remember what it is now. But it's just that, and then as he got a little older, he'd get cheeky and he'd go, I'd say, what goes on last? And he'd like, backpack. I'm like, cheeky bugger. Yes, it is. Backpack goes on last. I said, but backpack is not an article of clothing.
Yeah.
Right. But to watch him try to do up his zipper with mittens on was destroying me. I was just like, can we, I want you to be independent, but you can't do it. So, hey, like,
Zippers go on last.
yeah, mittens go on last. That's the thing. Also being able to relate information to other information that is meaningful to you, like remembering someone's birthday because it's on Halloween or something, right? Making associations. I have a terrible time remembering people's names. Terrible. Like I'm not good at it.
You're not the only one, because if you introduce yourself to me as Kimberly, that's how it's staying. So it took me a long time to transition from your last name to your first name, because you introduced yourself by your last name when we first met. And
Yeah, someone introduced me to you by my last name because, it was a professional relationship,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
So it was like, this is Peter's mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took me a long time. It took me a very long time, a couple of years, in fact.
That's okay. Moderate exercise before learning can also improve your ability to think and retain information.
Yeah, movement does definitely help, and it just activates all aspects, because now your body is, having to think about what movements you're doing, implementing. Your breathing starts to get into focus. The blood is flowing, so it really does help in engaging in learning.
Chunking information.
Yes, that is a great way for your level one learners, especially when it comes to applying that to academic skills.
Can you explain what it is?
So if you are doing an assessment, right, an assignment, not an assessment, it's, instead of looking at the entirety of the assignment, you're going to break it up into several parts. So first one is, understanding the topic of the assignment. Okay, what is the topic based on, right? So your topic is on, on trains, right? So it's a huge topic, right? So so trains, and it's asking you to focus on one particular model, right? So you're going to then go, okay, my subject is trains. Okay, I'm going to go specifically on one train. So I'm going to decide which train I'm going to go on. The second, then you're going to go into collecting the information. Then you're going to, apply that information and break it into small chunkable categories, and for not extended periods of time, because you want to be able to achieve the task and you don't want it to be overwhelming. And slowly, bit by bit, and then when you have everything assembled, you have the entirety of your assessment and assignment done.
I still chunk things. Like that is a viable strategy forever and ever.
Yeah.
Because I get overwhelmed.
And even sometimes simple when you've got a lot of reading to do is taking a piece of paper and covering half of it or more than half of it, so it's not visually distracting for you.
Yeah, you use that a lot with Peter. It's not like he can't read a paragraph. It's just it becomes a bit too much. And if you cover up a couple of lines, he's like, oh yeah, okay, I got this.
Yeah, otherwise it's just words just dancing all around the page.
Or you just get overwhelmed by it. You're like, oh, that's too much to do, right? What goes on last? Mittens. What goes on after mittens? Nothing, because mittens go on last.
There you go.
There you go. I remembered. It was a long time ago. I had to really, of course, I couldn't let it go. Imagine that. It is really, really important. I know we talked about this a little bit too, that executive functioning skills work together, right? They do not work independently. There's a lot of overlap, and one skill is sometimes necessary in conjunction with another skill in order to perform a task.
And not everybody is going to have a deficit in all areas, right? So you're going to have strengths in some areas and weaknesses in other. Use the strengths of certain aspects of your executive function in order to build up the areas of weakness. And it's done in small increments, it's practiced regularly, and it builds over time.
And as you get better in one area, it can help improve the other areas.
Yes. Yeah. And this is lifelong learning, right? Either whether you have executive function, issues or you don't. This is a lifelong learning. So be kind to yourself.
Yeah, it's going to be slow. It's going to be frustrating, and take time to reflect on where you started and where you are. Mm-hmm. That's all progress. It's all progress. Every single step is progress. Even if you're not where you want to be or where you think you should be, right? It's still better than where you were. So just keep going.
All right. Have you accomplished your list?
I did accomplish my list. Very satisfying. Thank you.
Okay. In discussing this, executive functioning and how complex it is, it got me thinking about, we're discussing how this impacts a person with autism, impacts, how neurotypical people work. And I think that is is a great topic for our next episode of, how complicated it is for a person, neurodivergent person, dealing with neurotypical people.
Yeah, I started thinking about this as a topic, and I said to Tessa, I said, I would really like to talk about, because as I'm going over these things, I do a lot of research on these things, and I find that autistic people talk a lot to other autistic people about how things are hard for them, and that camaraderie is really important and really validating. And I started to wonder, do neurotypical people don't really talk about their behaviors as much as autistic people talk about theirs. And then I started looking, I'm like, why are neurotypical people so confusing? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And then I was like, I would like to really talk about that in a podcast.
All right. So that's going to be our next episode.
Yes.
And until then, have a great day.
We'll see you then. Thanks for tuning in. If you know someone who might find this episode helpful, feel free to share. Also, check out our website and socials linked in the description.